Hi, my name is Joseph Grayhack. I'm a construction management major here at the University of Central Missouri, and this is my final interview project for my Management of Organizations class. For this project, I interviewed Matthew Grayhack, who is the Director of Talent Integration at Clayco Incorporated, which is one of the top design build firms in America, and a company that I interned with last summer, will be interning with again this summer, and a company that I've built a strong relationship with, one that I like, and one that hopefully going forward I will receive an offer from and be working for after I graduate in December of 23. So to kind of jump right in for this interview, I kind of broke it up into different sections, 4 different sections, which were the first one being talking about company structure and the hierarchy, which we talked about in class multiple times. Second section being leadership, whether it was mentoring and his thoughts on that. The third one being formal versus informal work groups and kind of the day-to-day interaction of people that work at the company. And the final one being a little more personal, which is work-life balance, work and family. How does he go about balancing that section of his life, which is something that I'm very curious about and something going into the workforce. I'm still forming my own plan of how I'm going to go about that. So I'm going to kind of run through the question I asked and then a quick synopsis of his answer. And then at the very end, I'll give my thoughts on what I got from this interview and what I'm going to pull from it going forward. So the first question I asked was, how would you describe the hierarchy setup of Clayco? And I thought he gave a really good answer. Within the class, we've talked about kind of that pyramid shape of you start with the lower departments and work your way up to the executives. And Clayco in a way is similar, but also in a different way, it's not. So within Clayco, the company, there are actually multiple sub-companies that each specialize in different ways, whether concrete, glass, architecture, project management. And so each of those companies have their own individual leadership setup that, yes, they have their hierarchy and their executives, but then there's an even kind of the overall, as he described, single executive leadership program, which is that's where you're going to find your CEO, CFO, president of the company itself is within this kind of separate executive group. And so rather than a pyramid, Mr. Gray described it more as a temple. And so each of those sub companies are its own separate pillar. And then that singular executive leadership program is that roof or that slab that rests on top of all those pillars. And that's kind of how the company is set up rather than maybe a more traditional company, because it is a little more complex. You have multiple companies within a bigger company. And so it's going to be a little different setup than we've seen in that we discussed in our classes throughout this semester. I then followed up with, over the years of Clayco, how would you describe your involvement with upper management with your day-to-day work? And he said that upper management in general is very active and is very involved within the company and the company's operations, but there are also certain things that the upper managers have more interest in and are more hands-on with than others, those being like client development and the sales. But when it really comes down to the day-to-day work of operating these companies and operating just whatever it is, the job sites or any other operations that might be going on, they more trust the people that they've put into place to do the job that they've been hired to do. And so, well, yes, they do check in and they do make themselves seen. It's more of they let those, rather than trying to get in there and really, in a sense, getting in the way, they kind of let these people do their jobs. And then if there's an issue, then they can step in. But it's more of they let the people they've hired do the job. And kind of to follow up with this one, I asked if they make themselves accessible. And if for whatever reason you found yourself wanting to reach out and ask a question, do you feel like that's something you could do? Do they make themselves accessible to their employees? And he said, very much so. The company has a very explicit open door policy, and he has experienced that firsthand of there really isn't anything that they don't feel like they can go to. And this is something I found very interesting is Clayco actually doesn't have an HR department. And so a lot of times, if there are those complaints, if there are those things that need to reach these higher level executives, it has to go through that HR department, and which is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because it eliminates that middle ground. You go straight to the executive rather than submitting a complaint and then potentially having it get lost in this whole system before it reaches them. And then it's a curse because there is no filtration system, and so there really is no ability to there really is, it's kind of anyone's game to get to that upper level. But I thought it was interesting that there isn't that HR department, so there really is that kind of direct line from the employee straight to the executive, and there really is no way for that communication to get lost. And I like how they make themselves very accessible, and anyone can feel like they can go and bring their concerns to them, as well as obviously as long as they are precedented and not just kind of out of nowhere. The next section is going kind of to leadership, and I asked if the company has a mentorship program, or how do they deal with bringing these people coming from either no culture or a different culture, and then now immersing them within the culture of Clayco. And he says, yes, this is actually a new program, one of the newest programs within the company. It's not even a year old yet, but yes, they have just started their own mentorship program, and it's kind of in two phases. The first phase, which is what is in action right now, is just that. It's bringing people in and introducing them to the culture of Clayco. It's not so much helping people in their careers, so it's not really career path developing, but rather almost more of a friendship based, I guess you could kind of say, of bringing people in, introducing them to all the different aspects of the culture of Clayco, and then helping them with any questions in that regard. And so to do this, they oftentimes pair people up with someone from a completely different department or a completely different scope of work in order to try to succeed this. And he said that there are still some kinks they're trying to work out, that a lot of people still see it as a career development. So they're asking these people that might have no idea. You might be asking an architect something about concrete development, and they're not going to have the answer to that question, because it's not really how this mentorship program is set up. It's more of, again, kind of trying to foster them, bringing them into the culture. Phase two would be that. It would be bringing people in and helping them develop their careers. And so that is kind of in the works right now and should be coming out hopefully in the future. I talked with him again about what his thoughts are on what makes a leader, and does he think, we hear all the time, leaders are born or leaders are made, and does he agree with that, or can anyone be a leader? And I think he gave a really good answer to this one, of really it comes down to your exposure throughout your life. Some people just naturally are exposed to more leadership opportunities than others, just in their day-to-day lives. And it really comes down to if you decide to act on that. And so it's something that needs to be worked on. And if you're going to take the time to pursue being a leader, then you will become a leader. And so it's, again, then he talked about kind of the two different types of leadership: organizational leadership and observed leadership. Organizational leadership being the role that you are in as a manager, and it's your job to organize the company in its day-to-day operations. Whereas observed leadership is more of that, the intangible interaction between you and your peers. And so that's where you're going to gain your respect and the trust of those around you. And it's more of that observed leadership that has to be worked on and is gained throughout the life, rather than organizational. Organizational, you're putting your role and that's your role. But it's how much you want to work on your observed leadership is going to translate to how effective you're going to be in your organizational leadership. And so I just thought it was a really good way of putting it, that it's something that you need to want. You need to want to get better at your leadership. And then over time, you will then be put into positions of that organizational leadership. And so one kind of plays off the other. And I thought that was just a really good way of putting all that. The next group we talked about was formal versus informal work groups, which is something I know we discussed in class. And first question I asked in this section was, from your experience, how would you describe the work atmosphere at Clayco? And for this, it was very much an open office layout. And so there really aren't these strict divisions between the different divisions of work. And everyone kind of is trying to foster this sense of collaboration and this flow. And it's not like you are here and you are here and these lines don't cross, but rather kind of this flow between these groups. He said this can lead to distractions because, again, if you're trying to focus on your thing and you have other people coming up to you, and it's kind of hard to get your work done, but in general, he thinks it's effective, but it can be distracting at times. That was kind of the next question is, do I think he finds this division of the apartments to be effective? And he said the company has this desire to make the divisions intermingle because, again, that's where that creative collaboration comes from, is you get these different minds from different paths together and then they form they form new ideas, and that's where new inventions and whatever comes from is from that sense of collaboration. He said oftentimes you find people, because that's just human nature, is you stick to what you know, you stick with your groups, and so you kind of have to help these people come out of their shells, from sticking with just their friend groups or just the people within their department and then reaching out. And so it's kind of, that's what his job is as talent integration, is to find a way to kind of help integrate these people and to help them intermingle and kind of get rid of this sense of I stick with my group and my clique, rather than going out and interacting with all the other people within the office and within the company. And then the final section of this interview was, again, as I said in the beginning, a little more personal, work family balance, and how he finds that balance between personal life and work life. And first question was, I knew he traveled a little bit before in his career, and I said, how often did you travel for work? And for him, it wasn't too much. It was overnight trips 2-3 times a month, which isn't a lot. But it's more than just travel. It's also how much energy and time you're going to dedicate to your work rather than to your family, and vice versa. And so whether the travel part of his job might not be as intense as what I'm going to be going into, which is project management, or which I'll be living on the road more or less, still there is overlap, which led into that second question of what were some things you enjoyed about travel? And it goes back to that sense of collaboration. And she said some of the things that he really did enjoy and misses about it was that ability to interact with other people in the business and to become a part of their day-to-day and kind of pick their brains and see what they thought about certain things. And then obviously not only traveling to the people of different parts of the business, but traveling with. And so usually he was traveling with, whether it was executives or different people from different departments. And again, you just kind of got to know other people and get to pick their brains and see their ideas. And again, that sense of collaboration was something that was powerful, and it's something that is where a lot of innovation comes from. The final question for this interview was, how do you go about forming that work-life balance? And I think he had an interesting outlook on it. He has an attitude more of, you focus more on quality of your time rather than the quantity of time. And so very productivity based. And so for him, obviously he's a salaried employee. And so you're not going in, punching the time card at 8 a.m. and you're clocking out at, 4 p.m. It was more of, you do what you need to do, what's expected of you. You have to make sure that you're taking care of your work, and what is expected of you is getting done before, and then you kind of have that flexibility to, whether it is you want to leave at work at 3 p.m. because you're not feeling good or you're tired, you kind of have your ability to do that, as long as you make sure you're getting what is expected of you done, and so it's that quality of work rather than the quantity of time that you dedicate to that work. And so he said he really doesn't feel like he needs to keep these normal business hours. And so he has this ability to integrate his work and family life into one, because he kind of has this fluid system but he has to make sure that he's getting and dedicating time to each of them. And then kind of he led into talking about availability is because he kind of keeps these hours and this outlook on work. He also has this feeling that it could be 8 o'clock at night and someone from the company has a problem with a program that he's developed. They should be able to feel they can reach out to him, and he, on the other hand, should feel that he can help them. And then even though it is technically past those traditional hours, he still has, again, because it's that productivity, it's that sense of doing his work that then he can help it and he doesn't feel bad, he doesn't get upset. That's just his job, and that's the way he chooses to run his business. Which I thought was a really interesting way the company allows him to do that. Again, it's like, as long as you're getting what we expect of you done and that you expected yourself done, then there's really no need to, all right, you have to be here until 5 o'clock tonight. No, it's like, okay, well, he's getting his work done, he's not slipping, there's no complaints from coworkers, then so be it. And that's the way he runs his business. And then he kind of led into talking about this newer generation of workers coming in, my generation, and how he's noticed a change kind of in that outlook and how they kind of feel like they need to have this so distinct separation between work and life, rather than kind of figuring out a way to intermingle them. And then in this delicate balance, and you work one within the other, and then if you feel that one starts outweighing the other, then you adjust, you make your adjustments. And that comes down to communication, that if you do feel like work is weighing too much, then having that ability to reach out to your managers and talk to them about, hey, I'm feeling overloaded, that I'm feeling burnt out, and that I've got too much going on, and then you work out a way to kind of balance that out. But it comes down to, which I liked a lot, was that productivity versus quantity of time. And so focus more on giving quality hours, rather than throwing a bunch of hours at it. And so I thought that was a really good way of looking at it. And so that was the interview. That was the questions that I had for him. Overall, I thought this was a great interview. I gained a lot from it. There's a lot of insight that he had that I had never thought about certain things in that light, kind of that work-life balance, what we were talking about. And then also that aspect of no HR department, which I didn't know that. And I thought was an interesting way, and I think a great way to kind of eliminate that barrier of communication between the employees and upper management, the executive level members. And so overall, I really appreciated, I gained a lot from this interview. And again, this is a company that I've built a relationship with and continuing to build a relationship with. And this has only kind of strengthened my conviction to continue to perform well and hopefully join them in a couple of years. But in the end, that's my project for my management of organizations class. I enjoyed this class. I enjoyed this interview. I enjoyed this project. And thank you for listening.